Alexander Pierce drummed his fingers against his mahogany desk, staring at the latest charitable donation requests spread before him. As CEO of Pierce Technologies, he'd grown cynical about people's intentions. Everyone wanted something from him, and usually, that something was money. "Mr. Pierce," his assistant James cleared his throat from the doorway. "The board members are concerned about the new community outreach program. They think perhaps you're being too generous." Alexander's jaw tightened. At 35, he'd built his empire from nothing, yet his board treated him like a naive child whenever he wanted to give back to the community. "Let me guess. They're worried I'll give away the company's profits?" They suggested implementing a more rigorous vetting process for recipients. That sparked an idea. Alexander wheeled his chair around to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline. "What if we did more than vet them on paper, James? What if we tested their character directly? Sir, remember that wheelchair in storage? The one from when I broke my leg skiing last year?" A plan was forming in Alexander's mind. "And that small apartment building we just acquired in Belltown?" James's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Mr. Pierce, are you suggesting I'm going undercover?" Alexander's reflection smiled back at him from the window. "For the next month, I'll pose as a disabled man of modest means. We'll select a few candidates for the outreach program and see how they treat someone they think has nothing to offer. With all due respect, sir, this seems rather extreme. The board wants verification. I'll give them first-hand proof of who deserves our help." Alexander spun back to face his assistant. "Set it up. Find me candidates who've applied for assistance, single parents, struggling small business owners, people trying to better themselves. I want to see who they really are when they think no one's watching." 2 weeks later, Alexander wheeled himself down the hallway of his new temporary home, a modest one-bedroom apartment in his recently acquired building. He'd traded his tailored suits for casual wear, his luxury penthouse for this simple dwelling, and his CEO persona for the role of Alex Peters, a web developer recovering from a car accident that had supposedly left him temporarily wheelchair-bound. The transformation was remarkable. Without his usual power suits and commanding presence, he looked like an entirely different person. He'd even grown out his facial hair slightly to better disguise his features. Not that many people would recognize him anyway, as he'd always been private about his public image. The first candidate on his list was Sarah Mitchell, a single mother who'd applied for the education grant program. She lived just down the hall with her 7-year-old daughter, Emma. According to her application, Sarah worked 2 jobs while taking online classes, trying to earn her degree in nursing. As Alexander approached the building's shared laundry room, he heard a child's laughter, mixing with what had to be the most melodious voice he'd ever encountered. The sound drew him forward like a siren's call. "And then the princess told the dragon." The voice cut off as Alexander entered the room. He found himself staring into the most striking green eyes he'd ever seen. They belonged to a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing scrubs and sitting on top of a washing machine, while a little girl with similar features perched on the dryer beside her. "Oh!" The woman, Sarah, he presumed, jumped down immediately. "I'm so sorry, we're monopolizing the space. Emma, honey, scoot over so this gentleman can reach the machines." "It's fine, really," Alexander said, but Sarah was already rushing to help him maneuver his wheelchair into the room. Her hands were gentle but confident as she moved around him, and something unexpected flickered in his chest at her touch. "I'm Sarah, and this is Emma. We're in 4C. Her smile was genuine, reaching all the way to those remarkable eyes. "You must be new here. I haven't seen you around before." "Alex Peters," he responded, suddenly feeling a twinge of guilt about his deception. "Just moved in last week. 4B, actually." Emma's face lit up. "You're our new neighbor. Mom, can we bring him some of the cookies we're baking later?" "Emma," Sarah chided softly, "Mr. Peters might be busy." "Actually, cookies sound great," Alexander found himself saying. "If it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Sarah assured him, and there was something in her expression that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't pity. He'd gotten good at recognizing that look over the past week. This was something else entirely, something warm and genuine that made him want to know more about her. "Do you need help with your laundry?" she offered, already reaching for his basket. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted with a gentle smile. "But everyone needs a helping hand sometimes, right? Emma and I were just killing time while our loads finish anyway. Besides," she winked at her daughter, We were in the middle of a story about a princess and a dragon, and you're welcome to hear the ending if you'd like. Alexander had interviewed countless executives, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and faced down corporate raiders without flinching. But something about Sarah's simple kindness, offered freely without any knowledge of who he really was, left him speechless. Emma picked up the story where her mother had left off, while Sarah efficiently loaded his laundry into the machine. He found himself drawn into their little world, laughing at Emma's creative plot twists and watching Sarah's face as she encouraged her daughter's imagination. When the buzzer sounded on their dryer, Sarah gathered their clothes with practiced efficiency. "Remember 4B, she said as they headed for the door. "Cookies coming your way tonight. Hope you like chocolate chip." After they left, Alexander sat in the laundry room for a long time, staring at the machine as it churned his clothes. This was supposed to be a simple test of character, a way to verify worthy recipients for his company's program. He hadn't expected to feel this immediate connection, this pull towards Sarah that had nothing to do with his mission. For the first time, he questioned the wisdom of his plan. Because if this was what falling in love at first sight felt like, he was in serious trouble. How could he possibly maintain his deception when every smile from Sarah made him want to tell her the truth? The washing machine beeped, but Alexander barely noticed. He was too busy wondering how he'd managed to create the perfect trap, only to find himself caught in it instead. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and the true meaning of wealth. The knock on Alexander's door came precisely at 7 o'clock. He'd spent the last hour trying to convince himself this was still just about vetting grant candidates, but his racing pulse suggested otherwise. When he opened the door, the sight of Sarah and Emma's matching smiles made his carefully constructed walls crumble a little more. "We come bearing cookies," Emma announced, holding up a plate wrapped in foil. "They're still warm." "Emma insisted on bringing them right from the oven," Sarah explained, looking slightly apologetic. "I hope we're not interrupting anything." Alexander wheeled back to let them in, hyper-aware of his apartment's modest furnishings. He'd had his team furnish it sparsely, maintaining his cover as a freelance web developer. "Not at all, I could use a break from coding." Sarah's eyes swept the room, taking in the laptop setup on the small dining table and the minimal decor. Her gaze lingered on a framed photo of the Seattle skyline, ironically taken from his actual office, though they couldn't know that. "How are you settling in?" she asked, helping Emma set the cookies on the counter. "Moving is always challenging, especially—" She gestured vaguely at his wheelchair. "It's been an adjustment," he admitted, which wasn't entirely a lie, but the building's accessibility is good. Of course it was. He'd personally overseen the renovations, though under his CEO identity. Emma was bouncing on her toes. "Can I show him my drawing, Mum?" Sarah laughed. "Someone's been busy since we got back from the laundry room." She pulled a slightly crumpled paper from her pocket. Emma wanted to finish the story from earlier. Alexander accepted the drawing, genuinely touched by the childish artwork. It showed 3 figures, a princess in a crown, a friendly-looking dragon, and what appeared to be a man in a wheelchair. "Is this me?" "You're the knight," Emma explained excitedly. "But instead of fighting the dragon, you become friends with him and help the princess build a school for all the kingdom's children. Mum says education is the most powerful magic of all." Alexander looked up to find Sarah blushing. "I might be projecting a bit there," she admitted. "Education is kind of my passion project at the moment." "The nursing program?" he asked, then immediately regretted it. He wasn't supposed to know about that. But Sarah just nodded. "How did you guess?" "The scrubs earlier. Yeah, I'm working as a nurse's aide while taking classes. It's taking forever doing it part-time, but—" She shrugged. "We do what we have to do, right?" "Mom's super smart," Emma declared proudly. "She helps me with my homework even when she's really tired, and she never complains." Sarah's blush deepened. "Emma, honey, I'm sure Mr. Peters doesn't want to hear about—" "Actually, I'd love to," Alexander interrupted, surprising himself with his sincerity. "And please call me Alex. Would you both like to stay for dinner? I was about to order takeout, and I always order too much." The words were out before he could stop them. This wasn't part of the plan. He was supposed to be observing from a distance, not getting personally involved. But something about Sarah's quiet determination and Emma's innocent enthusiasm made him want to know more. Sarah hesitated. "That's very kind, but we couldn't impose—" "Please, Mom." Emma's eyes grew wide. Mr. Alex has a computer with 2 screens. Maybe he could show me how to make websites while you study. Sarah's resistance visibly wavered. You have coursework to do too, young lady. I could help with that, Alexander offered. I'm pretty good at math, if that's useful. Another moment of hesitation, then Sarah's shoulders relaxed. Actually, that would be amazing. Emma's been struggling with fractions, and after working doubles this weekend, I'm not sure how much help I'll be. And just like that, Alexander found himself hosting an impromptu study session. They ordered Chinese food, and while Sarah spread her nursing textbooks across one end of the table, he helped Emma understand the concept of equivalent fractions using pieces of cookies as visual aids. See? If we break this cookie into 4 equal pieces and this one into 8, we can show that 2/4 is the same as 4/8. Can I eat the evidence when we're done? Emma asked, making both adults laugh. Alexander caught Sarah watching them, a soft expression on her face that made his chest tight. When their eyes met, she quickly looked back at her books, but not before he saw something vulnerable in her gaze. Hours passed like minutes. Emma eventually fell asleep on the small couch, clutching her math worksheet with its perfect score. Sarah began gathering their things, moving quietly to avoid waking her daughter. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the help with fractions, but it's been a while since we had a family dinner that didn't involve me rushing off to work or school." Family dinner. The phrase hit Alexander like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd had one of those? His massive penthouse kitchen had never seen the kind of warmth this tiny apartment had contained tonight. "I should be thanking you," he said softly. "It's been lonely since the accident. This was nice." Sarah's hand touched his shoulder, and he forced himself not to lean into it. Everyone needs connection, Alex. Even temporary neighbors who think they have to face everything alone. If she only knew how alone he usually was, surrounded by people who wanted his money or his influence, never just his company. "Same time next week?" The word surprised them both. "I mean, if Emma needs more help with math, or if you need a quiet place to study." Sarah gathered her sleeping daughter in her arms, and Alexander had to resist the urge to help, reminding himself he was supposed to be wheelchair-bound. "I'd like that," she said. "We both would." After they left, Alexander sat in the darkness of his borrowed apartment, his thoughts in chaos. This was supposed to be a simple character test, but there was nothing simple about the way his heart raced when Sarah smiled, or how natural it felt helping Emma with her homework. His phone buzzed. A text from James. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m., monthly review of the community outreach program. They'll want your preliminary findings." Reality crashed back in. Tomorrow he'd put his CEO mask back on, sit in that boardroom and what? Tell them about the hard-working single mother who shared her cookies and her time with a stranger, about her brilliant daughter who drew pictures of dragons and knights in wheelchairs. The deception that had seemed so logical 2 weeks ago now felt like a lead weight in his stomach. Because Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a grant applicant anymore. She was the woman who quoted nursing texts while helping her daughter practice fractions, who worked doubles and still found energy to bake cookies for new neighbors, who looked at him, the fake him, with genuine warmth instead of calculation, and he was lying to her with every breath. The worst part? He was starting to forget which version of himself was the real one, the powerful CEO who could buy anything he wanted, or the man in the wheelchair who'd just discovered that the things he truly wanted couldn't be bought at all. The following weeks fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to happiness. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Sarah and Emma would come over for what they'd started calling family study night. Alexander helped Emma master her multiplication tables, while Sarah tackled her nursing coursework. On Sundays, they'd do laundry together, turning the mundane task into storytelling sessions that left his sides aching from laughter. But living a double life was taking its toll. Each board meeting felt like a betrayal, especially when the topic turned to the community outreach program. Alexander found himself defending Sarah's application with carefully measured words, trying not to reveal how personally invested he'd become. "The Mitchell case shows particular promise," he told the board, keeping his voice professional despite the guilt churning in his stomach. "Her academic records are exemplary, and her work ethic is impressive. And your undercover observations confirm this." One of the board members peered at him over wire-rimmed glasses. Alexander gripped the arms of his executive chair. "She's exactly who she appears to be." If only he could say the same about himself. The breaking point came on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Alexander was in his CEO office, reviewing acquisition proposals, when James burst in without knocking. "Sir, there's been an accident at Seattle General. It's about Sarah Mitchell." Alexander's world tilted. "What happened?" "She collapsed during her shift. Exhaustion, they're saying. Her daughter's at the hospital, but they can't reach any family members." Alexander was already moving, grabbing his coat. "Clear my schedule." "Sir," James caught his arm, "you can't go as yourself. The whole deception—" Reality crashed back. Alexander froze, torn between identities. Sarah needed someone, but which version of him could help her? The wealthy CEO who could ensure she got the best care, or the neighbor she'd grown to trust? Get the wheelchair, he decided. And then call the hospital's administration. Make sure all her expenses are covered anonymously through the Pierce Foundation. Within an hour, Alex Peters was wheeling through the hospital corridors, his heart pounding. He found Emma sitting alone in a waiting room, her small face pale with worry. "Mr. Alex," she ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her automatically, then realized his mistake. Someone in a wheelchair shouldn't have been able to brace for that impact so easily, but Emma was too distraught to notice. "Mom wouldn't wake up," she sobbed into his shoulder. "There was blood, and they won't tell me anything because I'm just a kid." Alexander smoothed her hair, his decision crystallizing. To hell with the deception. "Stay here, sweetheart. I'm going to find out what's happening." He was halfway to the nurse's station when a familiar voice stopped him cold. "Mr. Pierce? Alexander Pierce." He turned to find Dr. Roberts, his family's longtime physician, staring at him in confusion. "What are you doing in a wheelchair? I just saw you walking at your annual physical last week." "Dr. Roberts." Alexander cut him off, but it was too late. Emma had followed him and heard every word. "Mr. Alex?" Her voice was small, confused. "Why did he call you Mr. Pierce?" The look of betrayal dawning on her young face was gut-wrenching. Before Alexander could respond, a nurse approached with an update on Sarah. "Family only," she said apologetically. "He's not family," Emma said flatly. "He's not even who he says he is." She backed away from him, tears filling her eyes. "You lied to us about everything." "Emma, please, I hate you." She turned and ran down the corridor. Alexander started to follow, but Dr. Roberts caught his wheelchair. "Perhaps you should explain why the CEO of Pierce Technologies is pretending to be disabled." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Alexander closed his eyes, seeing weeks of careful deception crumble. Worse, he saw Sarah's face in his mind, her open trust, her genuine kindness, all about to be shattered by his lies. "Her mother," he said hoarsely. "Sarah Mitchell. How is she?" Dr. Roberts consulted his tablet. "Severe anemia and exhaustion. She'll recover, but she needs rest. According to her file, she's been working 60-hour weeks while taking a full course load." He paused, understanding dawning. "She's one of your grant candidates, isn't she? This whole charade was about vetting her application." Put so bluntly, it sounded horrible. It was horrible. "I needed to know if people were genuinely deserving or just good at writing applications," Alexander said, but the explanation felt hollow, even to his own ears. "And what did you discover?" "Doctor," Roberts asked quietly. "That I'm the fraud," Alexander replied. "Not them." A commotion down the hall drew their attention. Emma had found a hospital security guard and was pointing in their direction, her face streaked with tears. The guard started walking toward them, speaking into his radio. Alexander Wheeler stood up from the wheelchair, his expensive suit wrinkled from sitting. The guard's eyes widened with recognition. His face had been in the business section just last week. "Sir, there's been a complaint." "I know," Alexander said, "and I'll leave, but first—" He pulled out his phone and dialed James. "I need you to send the board the Mitchell file. Tell them the grant is approved for the full amount. And James, add a special dispensation for childcare expenses." "You can't buy forgiveness," Dr. Roberts warned. "I'm not trying to." Alexander watched Emma disappear into her mother's hospital room, knowing he might never see either of them again. "I'm just trying to do one honest thing after weeks of lies." As security escorted him out, Alexander caught a glimpse through a door window. Sarah, pale but awake, holding Emma as she cried. He'd wanted to test their character, but in the end, it was his own that had been found wanting. The rain had stopped by the time he reached his car, but Alexander felt chilled to the bone. He'd gone undercover looking for people worthy of his company's charity. Instead, he'd found something priceless, a chance at real love and family, and lost it through his own deception. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd pretended to be disabled to test a woman's character, only to prove that his own needed serious rehabilitation. 3 weeks passed. Alexander threw himself into work, but everything felt hollow. He'd approved Sarah's grant through proper channels, ensuring she'd receive full tuition coverage, plus additional support for living expenses. It was the least he could do, though he knew money couldn't fix what he'd broken. Every night he found himself driving past their apartment building just to see the warm light in their window. He'd given up the pretense of living there, of course. His temporary apartment stood empty, a monument to his failed deception. "Sir," James entered his office one morning looking uncomfortable. "Ms. Mitchell is here." Alexander's head snapped up. "Here? At Pierce Technologies?" "In the lobby. She's quite insistent about seeing you." His heart hammered. "Send her up." Minutes later, Sarah walked into his office. She looked better than she had in the hospital, less exhausted, her color restored. But her eyes were hard as she took in his expansive office, the Seattle skyline behind him. "So this is the real you?" she asked quietly. Alexander stood, fighting the urge to reach for a wheelchair that wasn't there. "Sarah, I don't." She held up a hand. "I've practiced this speech for weeks. Let me get through it." He nodded, sinking back into his chair. "You came into our lives under false pretenses. You manipulated us, used my daughter's trust, all to what? Test if we were worthy of your charity." Her voice cracked. "Do you have any idea how that made Emma feel? She thought she'd found someone who actually cared about her, not just her test scores." "I did care. I do care," Alexander interjected. "That's what made it so complicated." "Decomplicated?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Try explaining to a 7-year-old why adults lie. Try helping her understand why someone would pretend to need help just to see if we'd give it." Shame burned through him. "I never meant to fall in love?" Sarah's words stopped him cold. "Because that's what this was becoming, wasn't it? Before the lies caught up with us." "Yes," he whispered. There was no point denying it now. Sarah moved to the window, staring out at the city below. "You know what the worst part is? The man I was falling for, the one who helped my daughter with fractions and listened to my dreams about becoming a nurse. He was real. Somewhere under all this," she gestured at his office. "That person exists, and that's why I'm here." Hope flickered dangerously in his chest. "Why are you here, Sarah?" She turned to face him. "Emma has a math test tomorrow. She's struggling without her tutor." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "She told me that even if you're a lying liar who lies, you're still the best at explaining multiplication." Alexander gripped the edge of his desk. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying we have conditions." Sarah's voice was firm. "First, no more lies. Ever. About anything. Done. Second, you're going to explain to Emma exactly why you did what you did, and then spend however long it takes rebuilding her trust." "Absolutely." "Third," her voice softened slightly, "the next time you want to get to know someone, try asking them to dinner like a normal person." Alexander stood slowly. "Would that work? If I asked you to dinner right now, as myself?" Sarah crossed her arms. "That depends. Are you asking because you want to make things right or because you actually see me? Not the grant candidate, not the single mum who passed your twisted test, but me." "I see you," Alexander said softly. "I've seen you since that first day in the laundry room. The way you tell stories to make Emma laugh, how you study medical texts until you fall asleep at the table, your kindness to a stranger in a wheelchair, not because you wanted anything, but because that's who you are." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "The chair was fake, but everything else was real. The way I feel about you both, that's real." Sarah's eyes glistened. "Prove it. Have dinner with me tonight, both of you. Not here, not at the apartment building, at my real home." He took a deep breath. "Let me show you who I really am. No more masks." "And who is that, exactly?" "A man who made a terrible mistake trying to protect his company's interests, only to discover that the real treasure was the family he almost lost before he had them." He held out his hand. "I'm Alexander Pierce, and I'm completely in love with you, Sarah Mitchell." For a long moment she just looked at his outstretched hand. Then slowly she reached out and took it. "Emma's test is on fractions," she said. "Think you can handle that without any props this time?" Alexander pulled her closer, his heart soaring when she didn't resist. "I'll bring cookies just in case, but Sarah—" He touched her cheek gently. "Thank you for giving me a chance to earn back your trust." "Don't waste it," she whispered, but there was warmth in her eyes again. "Never," he promised, and when he kissed her it felt like coming home. Later that evening, as Emma worked through fraction problems at his actual dining table, occasionally shooting him suspicious looks that melted into grudging smiles when he made her laugh, Alexander realized something profound. His plan to test the worthiness of grant recipients had backfired spectacularly, but it had given him something far more valuable, a chance to become worthy himself. Sarah caught his eye across the table and smiled, a real smile full of promise and possibilities, and Alexander Pierce, who had everything money could buy, finally understood what true wealth looked like. It looked like homework at the dining table, like forgiveness freely given, like love that saw past pretense to the truth of who you could become. It looked like a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste a single moment of it.